The story begins at Sidon Inn, where Gail Hamilton is busy taking notes on how to improve her adventure party. His concentration is broken when the party leader calls him and, to his surprise, informs him that his contract is being terminated. The leader makes it clear that, from that moment on, Gail is no longer a member of Wolfpack. Later, the whole group is gathered around a table. Gail scratches his head in confusion while the leader tries to get his attention and insists that he hears correctly. One of the members, Kush Bilbora, Paladin, bluntly announces that Gail was fired. Gail gets caught off guard and can't even finish her thinking. The woman at the party, Melissa, a light fighter, mocks him by grabbing her face and making fun of her reaction. Another member, Luke the thief, tries to stop Melissa from provoking Gail. She offers to comfort you one last time. Norris, the black wizard, snickers and suggests Gail should have seen it coming. Gail stands up and protests, asking them to give her a moment since the decision came out of nowhere. Kush questions his surprise and points out that Gail does not seem to understand why he is being released. Gail reflects on how they were together for 3 years, during which he supported the team by creating cursed items, a niche but useful skill back when they were still low rank. Still confused, Gail admits she doesn't know why. Kush mocks Gail's slowness and explains that as a cursed craftsman, Gail has the worst support job imaginable. Your cursed objects only undo monsters once and are useless. Besides, Gail is the lowest member of the group, trapped at level 31. Gail tries to defend himself, saying that although the art of the curse is not a common work, his items help them solve many searches easily. He explains how he can keep curses light, even dissipate them with proper support. He presents a passive curse necklace designed to affect monsters, but others react disgusted and ask him not to take it off. Kush Gail questions, since then and even using. Kush then says Gail they already found a replacement. Moria, Glarus, a new support wizard who mastered debuff and debuff techniques. Moria arrives and is warmly welcomed by the rest of the group. Gail tells herself she's attractive. Kush presses the point that Gail is no longer needed. As Gail steps away from the table, he can still hear others whispering behind him, saying that low-level members dragged the Shrank parties and that this would eventually happen. Desperate, Gail comes back and begs for one more chance. He says there are cursed things stronger than he showed before because he didn't want to disturb the party dynamics, but now is willing to bring them out. Your offer is received with silence. They just look at him. Kush doesn't say anything, just looking at him. Gail, with tears in her eyes, asks if they are absolutely certain that they will not regret this decision. Kush confirms they are. Gail reflects on how he supported them during their journey. Although he never made flashy moves, he was proud to have completed missions beside them. He hoped to stay in the pack forever. Kush, however, advises him to stop venturing completely and open a shop of cursed items. Melissa laughs, saying that he would attract the kind of people who are in scary things. Norris jokes that if Gail opened a store, he would tell the others, incriminating her like a freak. Luke doesn't express resentment. Gail accepts everything with bitter purpose and leaves. While walking down the hall, he wonders what went wrong after all the time they spent together. He remembers how Kush said he would cover Gail's room and alimony and that he could leave now. But he also insisted on keeping Gail's share of all the ingredients of the curse, which means Gail worked for free. Gail murmurs in frustration. Looking at them one last time, he sees the group laughing together. At the door, Gail makes a decision. He pulls a scroll material. Without telling them, he had secretly incorporated some of his weapons with cursed items that increased his base statistics. He hadn't mentioned it before, knowing they'd probably complain. But maybe it was never appreciated. Gail sings her spell. A magic circle lights up, and the reaction hits it hard. His face hits and he falls to the ground, panting. Many cursed items place binding effects on your user, offering increased statistics in exchange for penalties. In this case, curses on Wolfpack's equipment improved their performance, but reduced the experience they gained and inflicted minor diseases. Gail was absorbing all the inconveniences so the rest of the party could be better. He holds hands and comments on how intense the retreat was. But it also says you feel much lighter now. With the curse lifted, The pack of wolves will lose the benefits they earn from it, but Gale doesn't care anymore. They have their new support wizard now. The rest of the group was around level 50, and he had taken about 20% of his statistical reductions each. After checking his own statistics, he sees a dramatic change. Gale Hamilton has reached level 48. Your work is still a craftsman. Your new statistics program. Stamina 1.311. Go ahead 980 magic 3402. Agility 835 status plus 870 5 cursed slot machines 8. As a paladin, Kush had 5 force and 3 defense. Then Gale's new stats put him surprisingly high for a supporting role. Soon a woman approaches and scolds him for loitering. If he left, he should leave. Gale apologizes and leaves. He stretches, trying to figure out your next move. His broke. But he still has all the cursed equipment. Looking ahead, he sees someone drawing customers to a busy tent. The scene reminds you of what one of your ex-partners said. Maybe he should give up the adventure and open a cursed store. Gale was in conflict. As much as he resented the idea of doing exactly what his old party suggested, the idea of having his own store always remained at the bottom of his mind. A peaceful dream of living in the country, having a hardware store. A life where he could sleep whenever he wanted, eat whenever he wanted, create cursed objects of his choice, and use them freely for his own research. Now, without obligation to tie him up, that freedom was finally his. The bitterness began to fade, replaced by a spark of excitement. It was time to set up a tent, earn some travel funds, and start from scratch. Back at the Silver Wolf Inn, the remaining members of the wolf pack were enjoying a meal. The atmosphere was light, even commemorative. Kush commented on how things were better, and Norris agreed that it was a relief not to have Gale around anymore. Although Gale was a founding member, they admitted that they had spoiled him for a long time and should have replaced him before. Moria, the new support wizard, heard in silence. They turned to her and apologized for the embarrassment. Kush explained that he and Gale returned to the early days of the party and that Gale was in the habit of messing with his equipment, sometimes adding good luck charms or other minor enhancements without permission. Their conversation was interrupted when the light suddenly turned on above them. The enchanted equipment they used began to react at once, glowing unexpectedly. Moria looked up, recognizing the effect of a sync. The others were equally confused, insecure about what triggered it. Norris observed that his magic felt weaker, and Luke noticed a strange weight on his body. Moria, so frightened, questioned what kind of high-power spell they had just been hit. Kush laughed at the suggestion that it could have been a sync. Melissa had the idea that Gale had done something. Norris wondered out loud if it was retaliation for being expelled. Luke, getting more agitated, murmured that they should have eliminated him when they had the chance. Moria, trying to understand this, reasoned that if Gale cursed them, that would be understandable. But a dissipation that didn't make sense. Magic shouldn't hurt a party, it simply removed magical effects. If this spell had affected them all simultaneously, I would have suggested that Gale had removed their long-standing charms from them. She didn't believe it was to hurt them. Kush rejected speculation with contempt. He claimed Gale couldn't do anything threatening. Melissa supported him, saying that if Gale tried anything, they would easily dominate him. Moria tried to explain that it was not an attack, but a sync, but Kush cut it cold. As party leader, he declared Gale an enemy and warned Moria to quickly learn how the pack operated. Norris threatened to burn Gale if they crossed the path again. Luke joked that Norris, as weak in magic, might not even get that. Your games have increased. Luke even joked about mutilating Gale to stop him from curses, while Norris sarcastically questioned his accuracy. Melissa commented on how low they had sunk. Kush waved it, letting the others continue. Moria, however, remained thoughtful. She felt something change, too. By the time the spell was activated, it seemed that his stats had fallen, almost as if a passive impulse had been removed. Could they have benefited without knowing Gale's enchantments all this time? Melissa, perceiving her discomfort, approached and offered her a drink. Moria accepted with gratitude, but kept thinking. She knew that cursed craftsmen normally couldn't use fans, especially a strong enough to affect an entire party without them noticing. But what if Gale had created cursed items that could? This would put him in a class entirely of his own, and anything conventional that the cursed craftsmen were known to achieve. She watched while the others kept arguing. Kush eventually called Norris and Luke to ask. Moria remained quiet, lost in her thoughts. If someone like Gale, capable of such subtle and powerful support magic, had been expelled, was the wolf pack really worthy of your Shrank status? She started to doubt it. Could they call themselves elite without him? Meanwhile, outside the inn and no longer connected to the pack of wolves, Gale was chasing a bird that had stolen his cursed necklace, screaming to bring it back. A man was checking with Gale to confirm if he really wanted to open a market bank. Gale said yes. He wanted to set one up in the central square of the capital. He was inside the Pumpkin Seed Merchant Association at the time. The man agreed to help, but said the central square was a popular place, and renting space there would cost 4 gold coins a day. Gale went into his pocket, but all he had was 3 silver coins, all his savings. The man then mentioned that there were cheaper places on the way to the square. Gale agreed to take one of these. Gale brought all his stuff and rode in front of his cabin. Space wasn't perfect, but it was enough for him to start. The guild man gave you a beginner's kit. It was high and slightly used, but Gale was grateful and shook the man's hand. He was planning on selling his extra cursed items and some things that seemed cool enough to be used as decoration. He wasn't sure how much to charge for each item, but he figured if he could at least recover the money he spent on materials, it would be worth it. When Gale started riding and touching the items, he started wondering if he was showing them the best way. So the guild man came back and said he forgot to tell Gale something. He slapped a part in Gale's face and pointed out that Gale's display was wrong. He showed Gale how it should be done, organizing everything carefully and facilitating customer navigation. Gale was surprised by the difference and thanked the man again. The man gave you one last piece of advice. Everyone has their own way of doing business, but if the customers don't find what they're selling, nobody's going to buy anything, and Gale's going to end up broken. After that, the man waved and left to return to his post. Gale thought about how kind he was. After being treated so badly by Kush and the others, it really hit him emotionally. He cried. Under the shirt, he took a necklace. He liked it very much, but desperate times meant he had to sell it. He hung it in the tent, ready to sell. It was time to start. It was his first time doing something like this, and he started getting really nervous. He wondered what people in town thought of cursed objects. Would you be willing to buy them? Would they like them? He hit his own cheeks to increase his confidence. So he raised his voice and called people passing by. He announced he had a collection of debuff items, tools for adventurers, available at great prices. A passing man noticed his talismans and said they were rare. Another woman saw the cursed objects and wondered if a debuffant wizard would be more useful than such items. Gale explained that while cursed items are used once and not as powerful as wizard spells, they can be used by anyone and do not require magical power. It made them appeal to a wide variety of adventurers. People started to get interested. A different man was surprised to find a poisoned talisman being sold for only 5 copper coins. That was very cheap. Gale explained that he made them using parts of monsters and ingredients he mixed. So the cost was mostly his own time and effort. There was much more than just poisonous talismans. It also had items that caused status effects, increased statistics, and added other skills. The man decided to try to buy one. So something else caught his eye. He noticed a strange gun and asked about it. Gale said it was a cursed short sword. He slightly lowered his agility, but gave a powerful anti-weapon effect against monsters. It also increased all other statistics by 10 cents. The downside, it was cursed. The man was shocked and dropped his sword. He asked for confirmation, and Gale clarified. Yes, it was cursed. The man laughed nervously, saying that although he appreciated Gale's honesty, he was not sure who would buy a cursed sword. Gale joked that maybe it could be used for decoration. The drawing was nice after all. The man thought about it. It was scary, but he didn't hate how it looked. In fact, He thought it might even work to scare evil spirits from his home. They made a deal, and Gale included up to 3 free dissipator talismans. The man thanked you. Gale started explaining each item more clearly after that. What the curse was, how to remove it, and what the item could do. For example, the cursed necklace increased all statistics by 5%, but it came with a curse. The client still liked how flashy it looked and bought, with talisman syncs included, of course. The cursed boots gave twice and a half more agility, but again they were cursed. A woman bought it for her slave. Gale gave her talismans too. He showed a cursed beast. He raised all the stats by 30%. Shot right, skill, and yes, he was cursed. Someone else bought it to use in a hunting competition. Gale gave him 5 dissipating talismans along with him, and waved him with a smile. Later another man approached and asked about one of the items. Gale told him a story she once heard about a legendary hero whose closest ally was a berserker. That berserker loved cursed equipment, and his favorite armor was one of those cursed objects. Gale knew some people reacted badly to anything cursed, but he believed that if he explained clearly what the curse was, how to cancel it, and all the benefits the item offered, people could see the value in what he was selling. And from then on, things started selling. Gale had included the dissipator talismans with their cursed objects. Soon, more people began to gather in his tent. They were talking excitedly. They heard he was handing out free talismans with groceries. That surprised them, because that kind of thing was super rare. Standing in his tent, Gale kept calling to attract customers. He told everyone that everything was cheap, and it came with complete sets of cursed equipment, plus the free sinks. His plan worked. Eventually, every item he had was sold. The tent was completely cleaned. His bag looked light, much lighter than when he arrived. And he wasn't just some kind of client. All kinds of people had bought it from him. He even remembered a guy commenting that Gale's cursed equipment looked like death metal, very intense and nervous. That guy pointed to a specific item, saying he stood out more. Suddenly Gale heard heavy footsteps. A small group of men walked towards him and asked if this was the place that sold cursed items with free dissipations, and if any remained. Gale had to say everything was already sold out. The 3 men were visibly disappointed. It was clear that the offer of free dissipations caught people's attention. One of them regretted not showing up earlier before his search began. The group looked at Gale again and asked, "What if they brought some stuff? I could." Gale put curses on him and give them some dissipations too. Gale said he'd be back the next day, and before they could say anything else, he ran away quickly. Meanwhile, customers who bought your items were already talking to each other. Some decided to try out their new equipment. A man provoked his friend, who was always afraid of cursed things, not to faint. Despite the nerves, the second man placed the cursed ring. Soon after, he checked the statistics and was stunned. The impulse was real. He increased his stats by 50%. He showed the results to his friend, who was equally shocked. Could a single ring really do that? It almost seemed too powerful for such a small thing. Other close customers were also surprised by what they got. The 2 men who tried the ring were thrilled. One of them said that even if the ring was cursed, who cared? He wouldn't. But the other one had a concern. Having a curse removed by the church was very expensive, like an expensive gold coin. He even wondered aloud if they could sell the free sync talismans they have. Your friend told you to be quiet. If any priest heard that, they'd freak out. Still, they both knew the truth. The church charged a lot for pushing away curses. Whoever made these items clearly knew what they were doing. One of them guessed that every group of adventurers in the area would be chasing the guy who did this. They wondered who Gale really was. Damn craftsmen aren't usually as cheerful or useful. One of them even thought Gale looked familiar, but couldn't find him. While whispering their hunches and rumors, none of them knew the whole truth. Gale once took on the painful effects of 4 cursed items just to be able to support his team. Had gladly done it. He helped his old party grow strong enough to achieve rank status. And after all that, they kicked him out, leaving him with no choice but to sell his creations in a small tent on the side of the road, offering them at bargain prices. From that day on, stories about a mysterious craftsman with cursed equipment began to spread. People whispered about a man who showed up at random, sold incredibly powerful items for cheap money, and then disappeared. Gale, for your part, was feeling good. Even a little money raised his spirit. Things have finally started to get better. But at the same time, away from the market, his old party was in a dangerous forest search. Out of nowhere, a big explosion echoed. A tree was torn in half. Another boom followed, and Kush, one of Gale's former companions, was thrown into another tree. He screamed out of frustration. The team cursed with anger. How did this happen? They were a Shrank party, the best of the best. This shouldn't be happening. A giant monster roared in front of them. He was an ogre, and I wasn't backing down. The group was preparing for a high-level search. One of them, Melissa, was concerned about how they would perform with a new teammate. The search was classified as S, the greatest difficulty. But Kush wasn't worried. He himself chose the new girl, and believed that she was one of the best adventurers in the whole guild. Luke, another member of the team, hoped she could keep up with the team. The rest of the party smiled at her, and she smiled back without saying much. As they passed through the area, Kush noticed a monster nearby. He used it to warm up. They faced the monster, but the battle quickly became intense. Even Kush started feeling the tension. Luke shot arrows from his bow. But your aim was wrong, and one almost hit Melissa instead of the monster. He claimed something was wrong with his control. Melissa wasn't impressed. She called the monster just an ogre. But before she could finish her thinking, the ogre shook a big shovel and hit Luke and her on a tree. Kush asked Norris, his wizard, how long it would take to cast his spell. Norris, under pressure, tried to respond, but the spell he unleashed was just a flame. Kush was furious. Such weak magic would not help them. He insulted Norris without realizing that the ogre was already after him. Suddenly, a spell was activated. A brilliant magic field surrounded Kush and took him out of danger. Moria, your support wizard, saved him. She asked if he was okay, but Kush was too busy yelling at her to start polishing the party. Moria calmly explained that she was doing just that the whole time and was running out of magic energy. She then turned her gun and threw it on the floor. A flash of light spread across the field, and a bright mark appeared under Kush's feet. His stats doubled. He was now twice as powerful. She said he should be able to handle a monster like the ogre now. Encouraged, Kush attacked the monster, believing he had the advantage. But when he hit, the ogre stopped his sword with one hand and didn't seem bothered. He raised Kush in the air and threw him away like he was nothing. As the monster struck again, Kush had no choice but to retreat. As he ran, he cursed Moria, calling her a useless wizard. He doubted the power of his fans and blamed her for the situation. Moria walked away, remembering that he was the one who originally told her not to use too many fans before. He wanted to save them for a later fight with a stronger monster. So she mentioned a special debuff that had been left behind for them. It was something Gale had prepared before he left the party. Kush reacted in anger. He grabbed her by the collar, furious that she considered using Gale's cursed objects. He didn't believe they could help in this situation. But Moria explained that Gale left her notes, passing knowledge about her battle strategy, which they called Wolfpack style. He even included some cursed equipment she could use. Before Moria joined the team, Gale had been the only one to support everyone from the shadows, weakening his enemies with cursed items before the battles began. Kush pushed her and fell to the ground. At that moment, something lit up. Yesterday's strange magic circles were not normal lovers, they were curses. Gale cursed them before he left. Melissa agreed, realizing the same thing. Your strange failures and weakened strength during this struggle all made sense now. Luke admitted he felt something wrong from the beginning. Finally, the group decided that they would back off for today. As they returned, they were all angry with Gale. Kush was especially furious, thinking about how this road was known to be full of class of monsters. But skilled adventurers use this path all the time, and a team like theirs shouldn't have had any problems. They should be stronger than that. Luke tried to calm things down. He said that the curse Gale left behind was clearly affecting his performance. and it was smarter to regroup and come back to the fullest. Norris agreed, calling it a strategic retreat. Melissa also thought it best to back off, especially because the ogre didn't even seem interested in them anymore. The monster got tired of waiting and left, so Kush made the call. The team would be back for now. He said there was no reason to worry about the curse. They'd come back later and settle things properly. Moria was shocked when she realized the party was already retreating. It seemed too soon for such a strong group to give up. After all, they should be a strength party. But Kush pointed out that they were all in shape, and surprisingly, Moria didn't seem too hurt. The others agreed and said she didn't do much during the fight, so they told her to take the rear position when they left. Moria was stunned. She was a support wizard, not a frontline fighter. That kind of paper wasn't for someone like her. It didn't make sense, and she felt like they were pushing the responsibility on her. But Kush sent her away with thanks and told the others to move on. The whole party ran away, leaving Moria behind. The ogre, who was listening in silence the whole time. She stayed with Moria. He looked at her and made an observation about how difficult her situation seemed. Alone and furious, Moria crushed the roll Gale had left, threw in the air, and screamed out of frustration. But as the paper rolled through the air, suddenly lit up with a bright flash, and released a great cloud of smoke. Full of rage, Moria ran away, screaming that she was going to destroy everyone. Meanwhile, the rest of the party walked a long way and finally stopped to rest. They were sick and completely drained. Norris mentioned he lost his favorite item on the way. Everyone felt they were going to die of exhaustion. Kush couldn't believe they'd been beaten so badly by just one ogre. Melissa started blaming Moria. She pointed out the new girl wasn't much help. Normally, your team could handle several ogres without much trouble. Something really weird about today. They were abnormally weak and tired, even though they had run only a short distance. Kush said it was obvious what was happening. Melissa kept talking about Moria, saying she was showing off her body a lot instead of doing her job. The three guys in the group looked at each other quietly, thinking the same thing. How was that relevant? When Melissa turned to them, they quickly looked and murmured that it was nothing. Norris pointed out it wasn't just Moria's fault. Even before using any of their magic, their fight had already lost its spark. Luke agreed. He said Norris took twice the normal time to cast a simple spell. Norris fought back that Luke was no better. If Luke were in his usual form, that ogre would already be a pile of ashes. Kush brought everything back to Gale. He was the only one responsible for this mess. Now they were thinking how they could get back at him. So Moria took the group. Kush made a comment about how long it took and assumed he had lost the ogre. She was breathing a lot, but her eyes were focused on them. Kush noticed something strange. Something was stuck behind her back, and he wasn't sure what it was. Back in town, Gale was joyfully gathering his items. He thought to himself how fun it was to run a tent. Still, he wanted more ordinary people to buy from him. Some came to see, but most didn't buy anything. Most of their sales were for adventurers, especially those seeking their cursed equipment or useful dissipating talismans. While thinking of your next step, a family trader greeted him. Gale said things were going well and thanked him. He thought about moving his tent to a new location, and the merchant had an idea. The merchant thought of Gale's suggestion and realized that Gale was talking about the noble neighborhood, an area only 10 meters away. While ordinary people were mainly concerned with utility, wealthy nobles were more about chic items that seemed impressive. If the nobles saw Gale's equipment as elegant or artistic, he could become popular with them. You may even be asked to draw decorations for castles. That would mean he was more than just a craftsman. He'd be a trendy guy. The merchant also remembered one of Gale's clients from before, a man with red eyes who gave a strange and intense vibration. It made him feel like moving the tent was a smart move. With those thoughts aside, Gale focused on business. He set up his tent again, ready for another busy day. But what he didn't notice was that someone, a girl, watched him discreetly from a distance. Moria finally gets to the guild, but the others are already waiting and are not happy. The party provokes her for being late, with Melissa making a rude comment about her body. Luke points out that she's still just a rookie and hopes to learn the lesson from the last fight. Norris tries to move on and suggests everyone comes back. But Moria is confused. She doesn't understand what you're talking about. Then Kush suddenly realizes something behind her. The ogre they thought she was careful is back, now in real size because the effect of the cursed item has passed. Moria is stunned and insists she has not lost control. She quickly flees, screaming that she cannot handle the monster alone and the rest of them must take responsibility. Even if she should be the rear, she leaves them to deal with it. The ogre starts stepping towards the party, and they're terrified. Melissa, in panic, pushes the guys forward, saying they should deal with it. They freak out and try to distract the ogre by saying something ridiculous. But the ogre is not interested. As a vegetarian, with that, the party runs for their lives. For days it passes. The party is sitting on a table in complete defeat. They look dirty, exhausted, and miserable. Kush asks for water, and Melissa wishes she could take a bath. They were lost in a different forest after fleeing the ogre and had not cleaned up since. People in the room cover their noses. The group stinks. Behind the counter, someone asks Moria if these people are her party. She says yes, but they deserve what they're getting. The party's still blaming Gale. Luke said the service in this place is terrible. The innkeeper knocks a glass of water on his desk, saying they only have one, and even that's not free. Kush is angry and questions his attitude. But she calls them for what they are, parasites who didn't pay for their stay. They fight back, but she reminds them that they only paid until yesterday. If you want to stay longer or eat, you have to pay. Kush confidently says they are a party shrank, but then checks his money bag and finds it empty. Everyone pushes him to pay, but when they see his look, they realize something is wrong. Kush reviewed everything he spent on: beauty products damaged by the ogre, a new dagger, repair costs for the equipment, and even your custom sword that was destroyed. All the funds are gone. The wolf pack is officially broken. The innkeeper says it's a silver coin per person per night, another silver if you want food. That's 5 people, at least 5 pieces of silver. They sit there quietly, making strange faces. When she asks if they can pay or not, no one answers. Melissa, dying of thirst, faces the water. So, ignoring everyone, she takes a sip. The others are trying to stop her, but it's too late. Meanwhile, at the counter, Moria quietly asks for a drink and something to eat. The 3 guys looked at her, frozen in shock. They ask how she could pay without putting anything in the party funds. Nora says it's not okay. Luke acts like has been betrayed. Moria explains that she used her own personal money. She reminds them that their fund only applies when they complete a job together. But others try to twist their words. Kush said she's being silly and that everything should go to the bottom of the party. Melissa picks her up and says that what Moria is the party, and what the party is also the party. They hold it while they pass through the coin purse. Amazed at the money she has, they comment that talented support mages must earn a lot. Moria gnashes her teeth. She's furious. Kush tries to underestimate her, saying that her magical attacks are as weak as mosquito bites. But before he can finish the sentence, Moria's fist hits him in the face with a superior blow. He hits the floor. Melissa takes a chair and screams not to get cocky just because she has a certain kind of body. She shakes the chair in Moria, but only hits her clothes. Moria's already disappeared from that place. 1 minute, she shows up behind Melissa and punches her too. Luke and Norris are panicking, trying to calm her down, but Moria denounces them, calling them aspirants. Luke threatens her. But then a brilliant magic circle appears at Moria's feet. As the two try to attack, she turns to the air. Take them both down. Everyone at the inn is shocked. Moria calmly wipes her forehead and smiles. She apologizes to the innkeeper for the mess, offering to pay for the damage. The innkeeper is impressed and says if anything, she helped clean the place up. Moria then turns to her stunned teammates and announces that she is officially leaving the party with immediate effect. Meanwhile, back in the tent, Gale is negotiating with a noblewoman. She's impressed with her strange and unique items, especially one with a lizard design. Gale thinks to himself that is not a lizard, is actually a basilisk. He praises her taste and explains that it's a cursed oil lamp. A noblewoman visiting Gale's stable suddenly got scared. Her bodyguard quickly took a step forward to protect her. He was furious, thinking Gale was trying to sell cursed items to someone in high society. Gale quickly tried to explain. It wasn't a weapon or something dangerous, just a decorative piece. The guard asked him to explain more. Gale sighed. Earlier, Gale explained to other customers that the lamp had a charming effect. He had set his high prices, hoping for resistance. But surprisingly, many nobles were willing to pay even more without question. Even if his handmade equipment was popular, it was something he himself did. The single-use battle items were not getting much attention. Still, Gale had a decent sales day. It was time to start closing the shop. He remembered how, at first, everyone reacted so negatively to his cursed items. Nobles called them curious or interesting, but they never said they liked their projects. Gale began to wonder if perhaps his taste was too unusual for high society. While holding one of his items, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Someone asked if he was closing. When he turned around, he saw a girl looking at his goods. She wasn't dressed as fancy as other nobles, but there was something about her. Maybe she left a noble house. He noticed a man who looked like a guard watching her from afar. The girl inspected your items closely. She said she liked how different everything was. Gale was surprised. It was the first time anyone praised your projects. She pointed a ring, saying it was beautiful. Gale was shocked. He even blushed, glad someone appreciated his work. He didn't know exactly what kind of noble she was. But since she was clearly dressed, he didn't think I should treat her so formally. Since he was about to close, he decided to make a good deal. The girl then mentioned something strange. She said her scholarship was in the cast, and then she corrected herself, pretending to be home. She winked at him, saying he didn't have much money on her. Gale laughed, realizing he probably meant the castle. He said the money she had would be fine. After all, she was the first person to praise her work. But he told her to keep secret from her usual clients. She laughed and gave him something in return. When Gale opened his hand, he was stunned. It was a big gold coin. He couldn't believe she carried that much money. Before he could say anything, she was already smiling and leaving. He thought she was pretty, but then he shook. Someone was watching him from the shadows with a dark expression. He realized he'd forgotten something important. He didn't explain the curse of the item or give you a talisman to cancel. He panicked a little bit. Where'd she go? She was already gone. Fortunately, the item she bought was just a curse memorial ring, nothing too dangerous. The curse wasn't so bad. He increased his defense and made the user resistant to instant death attacks. The only disadvantage was that once you put it, you couldn't take it off unless the curse was removed. But she was clearly rich, so she could go to church to break the curse. When he saw her again, he promised himself that he would apologize and give her a proper charm. So he thought about what she almost said. She was about to say she lived in a castle. Meanwhile, the girl was grabbed and dragged into an alley by several hands. She fought, screaming it to let her go and asking why they were grabbing her. A woman showed up and asked the soldiers if they had caught her. They waved and the woman signaled them to move. The girl kept fighting and screaming no. Later, inside the royal castle, the soldiers fell, exhausted from pursuing her. The woman scolded the girl, asking her to stop causing so much trouble. The young lady remembered who she was, Princess Kara, but the princess didn't seem happy. In Gale's tent, he was walking when someone hit him on the back. A stranger said he was looking for a young man with black hair and a blue jacket that has a tent nearby. Someone who looked exactly like Gale. The man asked to see your face. But when Gale turned around, he got confused and asked if he looked so young. The man apologized and left. Once he turned the corner, he slipped in a hidden alley. Gale was upset. The military in the capital were looking for him. This can't be good. He decided it was time to pack and get out of town quickly. Some kids who saw him disappear in the alley were surprised and asked what kind of magic trick he did. He asked them to be quiet. A woman is scolding Princess Kara for wearing the ring she bought in town. She says it's blasphemous, something that goes against the church. But the princess doesn't see the problem. She thinks the nobles should mix more with the people in town and that includes buying their stuff. The woman looks around Kara's room. It's full of strange items from the city. She clearly doesn't share Kara's love for that. Kara points that out and mentions that the woman, Vivian, still has a lot to learn. Vivian ignores the comment and recalls that she was supposed to meet a foreign envoy that morning. So she needs to hurry up and get ready. But before Vivian finishes talking, she notices something. Kara's putting the weird ring on her finger. Vivian panics. She knows exactly what kind of ring it is and can't believe the princess would wear it to an important political meeting. Kara said she wouldn't use it. Just try it. Elsewhere, Gale is at Guild Adventurers, sitting at the table and enjoying a hot meal. He's proud of how well things are going. At first, he was nervous about working alone, but it's getting better than expected. Maybe he really has a gift for that kind of business. Still, he knows that selling repaired garbage won't make him rich, so he thinks he should do some real missions and maybe go to a different city soon. As he goes down to leave the guild, he sees his old party Kush, Melissa, Luke and Norris standing at the front counter. Gale quickly hides. He doesn't want anyone to see him. On the counter, the group is asking the receptionist for money. They want an investment, saying they're a Shrank party and deserve at least 10 or 20 gold coins. But the receptionist is not impressed. She remembers they haven't completed a single mission since they became Shrank, and it's hard to justify funding people who didn't get anything. Kush tries to argue that they still have time, but when asked if they met with a client yet, they admit they don't. The receptionist said a client had already filed a complaint. Angry that Elite Team, Shrank, ignored them. The group whispers about having trouble with a monster. The receptionist brings the ogre. Of course, he was a class enemy. But they're a class party. Your excuse. It was a changed version. She corrects them. He was just a normal ogre. She also knows they let them follow them into town, causing more trouble. And it wasn't even their only mistake. She asks if they think the guild is not paying attention. Kush tries to make a sarcastic comment, but the receptionist won't back down. She talks about Moria, who left the party a few days after joining. The Silver Wolf Inn even sent a complaint and an account to the guild because of his behavior. The guild had to cover it, so now the group owes them money. Gale, watching from afar, thinks to himself that the group is in serious trouble. They look exhausted and down. Suddenly, the receptionist slammed her hand on the counter. She's had enough. She challenges them to say the word investment once again. Kush grinds his teeth and says it's all Gale's fault. That shocks Gale. The group accuses him of cursing them. Because of your supposed curse equipment, your stats are ruined and even magic fans aren't helping. But Gale is confused. He thought had already removed curses from all of them. Luke's guilty. He lived for being useless and Norris agrees, but the receptionist cuts them off. She says that Moria is ranked in the top 5 mages of support across the capital. She only left her last party because of some problems, and the guild thought the Silver Wolf group would be a good fit. Clearly, they weren't. The team is stunned. They didn't know Moria was so well ranked. Even Gale is surprised. He never thought she was so strong, and now she's gone from the group. The receptionist then defends Gale. She says it's ridiculous to blame him. The curse is rare and your talent is incredible. Even one of your curse removal talismans is worth a lot of money. Gale listened to this, blush. He remembers doing some of these for the guild as a side job. The receptionist makes one thing very clear. They need to pay off their debts before they ask someone for help. Kush tries to act like it's no big deal, saying they'll pay back quickly. He sends the others away. Melissa asks what they'll do to Gale. But Norris reminds them that they need to find a mission that they can really complete. Luke agrees. No more missions Shrank until the curses are gone. Kush says shut up while you leave. Other people in the guild whisper to each other, wondering if that group is really Shrank. They don't look anything like they expected. Gale wonders what they mean about curses. He was sure he removed them all. Is there anything still affecting them? He doesn't know, but had rather leave before they see him and take his anger out on him. He leaves, just like a group of soldiers pass him. They're running somewhere in panic. You wonder what the emergency is. The other one says there's a fight between Princess Kara and Vivian. When they argue, it gets violent fast. It takes the whole army to calm them down. Gale can't believe that the army of the capital is called for such things. He comes by a merchant's shop and thinks about stopping by. He opens the door and hears the bell ring above him. In the castle, the guards are nervous trying to calm Vivian down. They remind her that she is in the royal palace and needs to breathe. But Vivian's furious. She screams that the ring Princess Kara is wearing is cursed. Everyone sighs. Vivian remembers telling Kara not to use it. But Kara ignored her, saying she just wanted to try it for a moment. Once the ring slipped on his finger, he refused to leave. Even with both pulling, he got stuck. An elderly counselor shows up and tells the princess to remove the ring immediately. Kara says she can't. Vivian said there's only one option left. They'll have to cut off her finger to remove it. With the sword in her hand, she moves towards the princess, saying there is no time before the diplomatic meeting. The guards are panicking. Everyone runs to protect the princess. The next day, Princess Kara received the envoys and thanked them for their patience. When they saw her, they bowed respectfully and praised her appearance. She smiled and thanked me back. One of them noticed the ring on his finger and asked. She laughed and made up a story, saying she'd cut herself. Earlier that morning, she and the others were still fighting to get him out when the arrival of the envoys was announced. Trying to be a good hostess, Kara mentioned how tired they must be of traveling and suggested they start with tea. But the envoys politely refused, saying they had brought something better. Snacks and tea straight from the Empire. They offered him a chance to try them, clearly excited to show what they had brought. They made gestures toward a very large box they brought in. Kara was surprised at the size and joked about how many snacks it should contain. But when the box was opened, its expression changed completely. There was no food inside. It was a group of armed bandits, hiding with guns ready. One of the fake envoys revealed his true plan. The bandits had poison on their blades that would kill instantly and painlessly. The whole room went into chaos while the royal guards were screaming to protect the princess. Vivian, as always, reacted quickly and ordered the soldiers to attack. But it was too late. The killers moved out. They targeted Kara, ready to take her down. But your weapons didn't land. Instead, the spears and blades jumped out of something invisible. Everyone was stunned. The killers tried again. Still, nothing worked. It was like a wall was protecting her. The princess herself did not understand what was happening at first. Then she suddenly realized something. Could it have been him? She remembered Gale, the man who sold the ring. She had been the first person to praise her projects. Could this ring have created a barrier? Vivian had the guards capture the fake voice, so she ran to the princess and checked if she was hurt. Kara said she was fine. Vivian was confused about why someone would pretend to be from the Empire. But for now, she said they needed to take the princess somewhere safe until things calmed down. Later, at a place called Star Chamber, two men were examining the ring. They asked Bishop and Arizal, the appraiser, what they thought. Was it a dangerous curse? The bishop replied that it was not dangerous to remove, but it was incredibly complex. It was clearly done by someone with deep knowledge of the magic of the curse. The curse in the ring was high. It increased the effect the user would receive, but also came with huge side effects. To fix this, the crafter had several counter-cursive layers on top, canceling the bad parts out. The bishop kept explaining, but Kara couldn't understand what he was saying. It was very technical. He said there was more to explain, but he gave the rest to Arizal. Arizal, looking surprised, said the ring gave the user triple the defense and protection against being killed instantly. Vivian was shocked to hear that. Arizal explained that this level of power was not just a sacred relic. It was either a sacred relic or something even bigger. Arizal seemed very excited for someone looking at a cursed object. He even said he never thought he'd see anything so amazing as a teenager. As soon as he got carried away and held the princess' hand long, a sharp fist fell on his head. Vivian, angry, warned him to behave. Vivian then remembered something. There was another church relic called the Angel Shield, which had a similar effect. Arizal confirmed that she also offered protection against instant death. But the bishop said that no other known item had the same effect and seemed so common. He said there was one more artifact that came close. The most valuable treasure in the Empire, the Heart of the Devil. This item had a long list of powerful abilities, instant death resistance, stat impulses, faster spells, and more. But it came at a price. This would slowly drain the user's life. If it wasn't removed in time, it'd kill them. That was the price of such immense power. Vivian nodded. She said that in their world, great power always had a cost. That's how magic works. But this ring didn't seem to have great disadvantages. That made it even more incredible. Maybe even more valuable than a relic. Kara then turned to Vivian and raised Gale again. Vivian said she remembered what he looked like. She asked if Kara wanted her to find him and deal with him, possibly wanting to fight him or punish him. But Kara said no. She didn't want revenge. She wanted to see you to thank you. Cursed or not, the ring saved your life. Anyway, she wanted to meet him again. Gale was preparing to leave the capital. He wore a cape that had a side pocket to carry his equipment, and he really liked what he felt. He also wore wrist sleeves made with wire lining for extra storage and boots designed to carry items while protecting his feet. He had all the basic equipment ready, including a handmade dagger. The rest of what he needed, he planned on finding it along the way. With everything ready, he finally decided it was time to leave. When looking at the city, the morning air was fresh and fresh. The streets were slowly coming to life as people began their daily routines. Gale felt a strange feeling. He was really leaving the capital, and somehow it made him stop. While walking near a dark alley, he looked inside out of curiosity, and then stopped, surprised by what he saw. It was his old adventure party. They were together, clearly cold and miserable. One of them, Melissa, got angry when someone touched her. Norris responded rudely, as usual. Seeing this, Gale tried to tell himself that these people no longer mattered to him. He shook his head and left. The city was getting busy. Gale went through the market where he heard people talking. One person said more help was needed somewhere. Another replied that the palace guards were already watching the gates, so there was nothing to worry about. Then he heard horses galloping. Turning to look, he saw the Royal Night Corps and even soldiers from the capital. That was unusual. What were they doing here? Soon, he noticed posters being placed. The sign asked if anyone had seen a man who seemed to be in his teens, sloppy, with black hair, selling cheap street decorations. The message said if anyone saw him, they should contact the castle or the nearest knight or soldier. Gale heard it while the knights were talking. A knight asked if the square had been searched. The other replied that the capital army was already fully covering. They had check-ins, guilds, everywhere. Gale kept calm and acted like he didn't know anything, even if the description matched him almost perfectly. But he told himself it couldn't be him. After all, your items weren't so cheesy. One of the knights was frustrated, saying they didn't have enough information. Then he looked at Gale. He said there were a lot of sloppy guys out there, and Gale seemed to be the right age. He examined Gale's equipment and said it sounded tacky, but added that Gale didn't look like the guy they were looking for. Gale was upset about the insult, but he didn't say much. The knight was convinced that the real suspect wouldn't be dressed so well. He said the man they were looking for was selling scary things, and it looked dirtier. Gale agreed to avoid trouble, and the knight let him go. After that, Gale leaned against a wall and sighed. He felt like an idiot for being so emotional about the city. He told himself it was time to move on. At the city gate, many stagecoaches were lined up, ready to take people to different places. Gale considered your options. He needed to go somewhere with job opportunities. Emirates was a big mall, good for business. Gracious Fort was a military base. Grandstadt was an old town, full of history. Then a coachman shouted that there were only 2 places left on a ride, and they were going with a discount. When Gale heard the word sale, his interest lit up. He asked where he was going. The coachman said he was going to Farmage, an agricultural center. Gale thought of fresh food, and his mouth practically watered the idea. He raised his hand to claim a seat. But someone raised their hand too, and said they'd like one too. Gale turned around and was surprised. The person looked familiar. She took off her cape, and yes, she did Moria. Glarus, a girl from the Kush party. It's only been a few days since you two met. Gale recognized her and realized she stood out too much. She was attractive and had a strong presence. Moria smiled in a way that made him nervous. He was going to say something, but her look made him rethink it. He felt a little guilty about what he was thinking and blamed it on being a guy. Inside the bus, they both sat down. Gale tried to be friendly and said they should get along on the trip. Earlier, Moria had punched him in the face, and now her cheek still hurts. Moria responded coldly, but clearly she wasn't angry anymore. When the coach left the capital, Gale yawned. He was very tired. Moria pushed him and said he was too close. He apologized and explained that there wasn't much room. He looked around the coach. There were metal goods and imports packed for transport. A hired mercenary was guarding the cargo. Some other travelers were also on board, and, of course, sitting next to him was an intense woman, Moria, who had already left her party. This happened fast. Gale sighed to himself. How could he sleep like that? He remembered that even if they didn't start well, it was better to keep things calm for now. Moria said she wasn't mad. Gale thought maybe it wasn't. After all, she joining the party had nothing to do with why she kicked him out. Kush was probably just interested in her, and the others were already planning to get rid of him for a while. She probably came at the right time to make it happen. He asked why she left the group, called Wolfpack. She turned to him and, instead of answering directly, asked why he had not left the party before. Then she laughed and explained what had happened. Apparently, not even a big monster caused trouble, just an ogre. And Kush couldn't even handle it. According to her, Kush was a useless leader, and the others in the group were not much better. They were beginners, and their magic spells and bow and arrow were weak. She couldn't understand why Gale joined such a terrible team. He asked if she was sure it was Kush's fault. She answered like there was no doubt. And now the guild had noticed how bad he was too. That's why she was also leaving the capital, so things would calm down. She told him that the other party members started blaming him for all his bad luck. But honestly, to her, he seemed the only one in the group who knew what he was doing. Gale smiled at it, so she quickly apologized, realizing that he probably had mixed feelings since he met those people. Gale said everything was fine and apologized that her time with them turned out to be a mess. She said it wasn't his fault. She called him more Gale, but he said to call him Gale. After that, there was a moment of silence between them. Gale looked at her. She wasn't carrying much. Maybe she left the group before she jumped in the trailer. Wanting to help, he took a loaf of bread out of the bag. He cut off some ingredients and made a quick sandwich. He joked that she was officially part of the Wolfpack Victims Club. She said she wasn't sure how much of a victim he was. But when she saw the sandwich, her eyes shone and she accepted. He told her not to worry about the little things, so he offered the other passengers sandwiches too. Moria took a big bite and said it was great. She was surprised how quickly he arrived. Gale laughed and said it was all about having good ingredients. He even drank wine with him. She joked that he wanted to get her drunk, but she noticed something. It wasn't just any wine. It was Romaine wine, a rare and expensive type. She asked if he was okay with her drinking. He said yes. His market had been a great success, so he could afford it. Moria mentioned something Shed heard. There's been a major commotion in the market recently about someone selling an artifact item from a tent. Of course, she didn't know it was Gale's tent. Gale was surprised. An artifact. In a regular tent. What kind of fool would sell something so rare and powerful? Moria said even the princess was looking. It made him stop. He remembered a certain moment. The castle, the princess, when someone came after him. But he quickly shook, thinking it couldn't be connected. She asked if he had the artifact, but he cleaned it up, saying it didn't look like the kind of person who would be carrying one. She agreed. He didn't look it. He joked that she might have lied to him to make him feel good. She said that people who create artifacts usually live in temples or sacred mountains. He agreed, like old hermits hiding in the mountains. Then all of a sudden, Gale made a funny face, wrinkling it like an old man. Moria turned to him and laughed so much that she echoed through the whole carriage. They clapped and she said she was starting to like him. Gale said he didn't hate her either. They agreed that if they weren't trapped, in their current roles, He was a curse craftsman, and she was a support wizard. They would be a good first-line team. Still, maybe someday, if they get the chance. But before he could finish that thought, something hit the carriage. Everything went black for a moment. He couldn't see anything. The screams came from outside. It was an orc attack. Because the caravan had been shaken so hard, he ended up leaning on Moria's chest. He commented strangely on how soft it was. Moria hit him and remembered it wasn't time for jokes. Outside, things were getting worse. The mercenary guard had been eliminated. One of the men ran into the carriage, screaming for help. The passengers were terrified. The orcs saw her wagon and started running towards her. Moria realized this was bad. The orcs were coming, and no one in the carriage was trained to fight except maybe her and Gale. She asked Gale if he had a gun. He was confused for a second, but she explained that there was no choice. They had to fight. She had a magic stick and a little dagger. Gale said he had some unique use talismans that could delay enemies in a short sword. Not the most powerful tools, but better than nothing. Moria admitted it wasn't good, but they had to try. She said she hated sitting around waiting to die. Although she was more used to supporting magic and only fought in emergencies, she said he could trust her. Gale said he'd take the front line and she should support him. She agreed and apologized. He told her not to apologize. He would never let a girl fight alone if he could avoid it. Then he shouted that it was time to show these orcs what two adventurous excessive hierarchies could actually do. The orcs didn't seem worried about them. Gale thought they didn't think he or Moria were a threat. That's why he had to strike first to at least take one down. Moria threw some little rocks on the floor. Gale looked at her and shook her staff. Suddenly a barrier appeared. She said she should hold on for a while and strengthen him with aficionados as soon as possible. He waved, thinking she knew how to plan things. He squeezed the dagger hard. Moria noticed the gun and shook. There was something strange about him, some kind of dark energy around him. It looked like it was covered in black magic. At the beginning of the battle, Moria explained her plan. It was simple, but I needed a perfect moment. Magic doesn't work immediately, so she'd have to activate it at the right time. Once it began, she believed Gale would be strong enough to seriously hurt at least one of the orcs. After that, it would be up to him. He would have to use the magic of the curse to arrest them, while defeating as many as he could. Gale agreed. If they could take it long enough, there was a chance a patrol nearby would notice that something was wrong and come to help. Until then, they'd have to trust their luck. Although she had said all this with confidence, Moria still had doubts. That weird gun he had, it gave him the creeps. Gale said it was just a dagger used to weaken enemies, but she didn't believe he called something so normal. Before she could question him further, he told her to support him and move on. She tried to stop him, but he was gone, so Moria knelt on the floor and started drawing a symbol with her fingers. She cast a quick spell, saying it wouldn't last long, but the effect would be powerful as long as it was active. Gale reacted immediately. He pulled something in shape and threw it right into the orcs. The range was great. It fell right where he wanted it. The scroll attached to the item unfolded in the air. Without wasting time, Gale ran to the orcs. The orcs noticed him, but his curses activated just in time. Black magic wrapped around them, confusing and disorienting them. Their armor shook, and they grunted, not knowing what was going on. Moria was stunned. The sight of it made his legs tremble. What kind of curse was that? Whatever item he played, it was clearly shooting only the monsters that meant wrong. But it was so powerful that Moria felt that even she could be involved if she lost focus. Gale advanced, saying everyone would fall together. Moria called after him. He was going too fast. Your spell wasn't even over yet. One of the orcs roared, but before I could attack, Gale had already reached. 1 minute, he cut his neck and beheaded him. So he was out again, attacking others with the same speed and strength. He screamed out of excitement, thinking it was all because of his fans. But Moria knew the truth. This wasn't her fault. What she saw went far beyond what her support magic could achieve. The dark aura around the battlefield wasn't just dulling the enemy's strength. I was terrorizing them, weakening their armor, and probably even paralyzing them. She had never seen a curse do all this. And that dagger he was wearing, just looking at her, she could say it had special effects that were always active, like making his armor disappear and hiding his true strength. She didn't believe he called it a normal blade. It had to be a legendary weapon. She held her head in disbelief. This whole thing was completely insane. Meanwhile, Gale was having a great time. Your body was glowing from all the magical improvements. Moria's support magic has increased all her skills. Their strength, speed and reaction time were far above normal. He was surprised and thanked her for it. But Moria tried to explain that although technically it helped a little, that's not what she did. Gale laughed, saying that he finally felt strong enough to take down these monsters. Moria looked at him and realized something terrible. The statistics were dropping fast. The spell she used was missing a key part, magic energy. She forgot to carry it properly. The fans were disappearing. She said she'd fix it and it was no big deal. Gale, still full of energy, said that together they were both unbeatable. Moria was confused. Why was he so excited? Without waiting, Gale jumped high in the air and cut another orc, only one left now, standing in front of him. But when that roared, more orcs appeared behind him. Gale didn't hesitate. He threw more cursed items at them. A big explosion followed. Magic was very powerful. Each orc nearby had his head separated from his body. He applauded, thinking it was all thanks to Moria's support magic. The orcs were frozen instead of their curse of slow effect. But Moria didn't like it. That spell shouldn't have delayed them so much. By reducing speed by 90%. That was unheard of. She tried to get his attention and explain that he had misunderstood. But before she could say anything, she saw him hiding behind another orc. With a quick move, he stabbed the back of the head with his dagger. And so another deafening explosion shook the battlefield. The last orc fell to the ground. Moria looked at him in disbelief. Had he defeated in a coup? This kind of instant death was extremely rare, almost impossible without a powerful artifact. She couldn't understand. How could Gale, of all people, do something like this by hand? Nothing else made sense. Gale turned to look at her with a big smile on her face. He was clearly moved by their victory. Before she could talk, he grabbed her hands and tried to turn her around like they were dancing. He was still full of excitement and couldn't stop praising his support magic, thinking it had made all the difference. Moria gave him a heartless thank you, a little overwhelmed by how exaggerated he was acting. The other passengers who were hiding and watching began to spy. Gale waved to them joyfully, and soon they all ran to him, clearly grateful and amazed by what they had seen. Later that night, around the fire, Gale admitted something surprising. It was the first time he fought monsters. During the battle, he was terrified. Moria was surprised. He was part of Kush's party, wasn't he? Gale confirmed that it was one of the founding members. But he explained he wasn't much of a fighter, just someone who used curse magic. Moria was quiet for a moment. So she said Kush must have been an idiot to let someone like Gale go. Gale blushed and stuttered, not sure if she really meant it. He admitted that he honestly didn't blame Kush for dropping it. Maybe it was the right decision. Moria turned her eyes. She couldn't believe how little self-confidence he had. She changed the subject to the coffee he had made. A mixture of dandelion with very good taste. She praised how skillful he was in so many different things. Gale tried to slow down, but she insisted that what he had wasn't just a few tricks. It was more like being almighty. Gale seemed upset and told her not to overdo it. He didn't see himself as something special, especially in battle. Moria sighed of frustration. They were walking in circles. There was something unusual about him. He definitely stood out, and yet he acted like he didn't. She said she was going to sleep and thanked me for the coffee. He said good night. She went to her tent, leaving the rest of the group sitting around the fire. Gale stayed up a little longer, thinking about what he said. Omnipotence, huh? That was a heavy word. You never thought of yourself as someone with that kind of power. He really believed that the previous victory had only happened because Moria supported him very well, but still, something inside him moved. He remembered to be part of an alliance, a party, and how exciting it was. Fighting monsters, though scary, was fun. He laughed silently at himself. Moria was very kind to him. The next morning, the caravan kept moving along the road. The driver said his fate would be near. Moria, now awake, poked Gale, who was still half asleep. He asked if they were there, and she confirmed it. They looked forward. They had arrived. They walked towards their next stop, Farmage, ready for what came next. Gale and Moria arrived at a place called Farmage. It was a typical area of the countryside, full of open fields, animals and farms everywhere. Gale mentioned they were an hour from the border. They left the wagon because it was clear that this place was all about agriculture. It was just fields and pastures as far as the eye could see. Gale had a plan. He was going to the Guild of Local Adventurers, negotiate the parts he had taken from orcs to earn some money, and then start taking missions. Moria decided to go with him to the guild because she wanted to find a party to attend. Gale, however, said he wanted to work alone for now. Later, at Farmage Adventurers Guild, Gale began checking the search board. Moria was surprised by what she was considering. It seemed very difficult to do alone. Gale was confident. Still, he ended up asking Moria if she'd help. The search involved hunting for undead creatures, and it was classified as which meant it was very difficult. But Moria remembered that they were both supportive adventurers, not frontline fighters. She didn't think it would be as easy as her last mission with the orcs. Gale smiled, like he already had something in mind. Then a black elf suddenly appeared and greeted them. None of them had noticed before. She was curious about Gale because she hadn't seen him before. He said he was young, having just arrived from the capital, hoping to try his luck in this region. The elf explained that Farmage was mainly an agricultural and commercial city, and there were not many adventurers around, which made things difficult for locals. She even grabbed Gale's hands and thanked him for showing up. Gale's heart skipped a beat. She was pretty, and he definitely noticed. Meanwhile, Moria stood behind him, not looking very happy. Cuffed caught the leprechaun's attention. The leprechaun asked if she was his friend. Moria said no, they were traveling in the same direction. She introduced herself as a support wizard, also from the capital, and said she would be happy to help as she could. The eyes of the dark elf shone. Supporting magnets were in high demand here, so she was excited. Then she looked at Gale, realizing that he did not use heavy equipment. She guessed he might be a thief. Gale corrected her, saying he was a curse craftsman, someone who uses magic with curses. He explained that while support was his main focus, he could take care of himself in a fight as well. The leprechaun was a little surprised. Cursed craftsmen were rare in this area, and she wasn't sure if there was any proper mission for someone like him. Gale blushed with his reaction, while Moria seemed even more angry. Gale said he was planning to do some missions to get used to the area. But the elf was shocked to see that what he chose was a lich hunt, a job that was untouched for a while. She called it a closed case because no one had taken it. There were no clergy strong enough to deal with it. And without them, the undead were taking over. Families could not even visit the graves of their loved ones. It was a bad situation. She was worried. If Gale were just a craftsman of the curse, this mission could be a death trap. Moria told her to be gentler with her words, but Gale said everything was fine. He was used to it. Moria wanted to discuss more, but Gale made sure he was okay. The leprechaun warned him again. No one had completed this mission yet, and if he had problems, no one would come to save him. Still, Gale said it'd go ahead. He asked for a map of the area. The elf offered holy water and magical items too, but he just wanted the map. She confirmed that the search was his and told him how to prove that he completed it, bringing back lich calls. Gale already knew that. He had experience using them before, which surprised the elf. She thought it was funny and asked him to be careful. When she leaned over and told him how much the city needed adventurers, Gale began to blush again, until Moria stepped on his foot with strength. She was clearly angry. The elf laughed, saying they both got along very well. So she added one last thing. She got them at the farm. The woman in charge of the guild of the adventurers in this agricultural town presented herself as Gimli. She greeted Gale and Moria politely, bowing down and saying she was eager to work with them. Gale waved back, saying the same thing, and then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he sucked. It was full of remains of his previous mission, parts taken from orcs. Gimli was impressed by what he had collected. He said they'd start the new mission tomorrow. Gimli made a comment about how casual he was acting, like moving from city to city and having hard jobs was nothing to him. Gale thanked him, but made it clear he wasn't praising him. Once they were outside, Moria talked about how he was staring at Gimli. She provoked him for getting excited just because someone showed him a little attention. He smiled and pretended not to know what she meant. Moria told him to forget. But it seemed she was deciding to join him on this journey. Gale said you already planned it, right? She didn't respond, and he joked about how not to say anything confirmed it. Moria freaked out she wasn't worried about him. She said she was there to be his backup, like a safety net if things went wrong. Gale looked at her surprise. When she blushed and asked what he was looking at, he said having her around made him feel much better. She blushed even more, wondering how he could say something that serious. Gale admitted that this was his first search on his own, and he was nervous. Moria said people who are going to hunt down the undead should be nervous. But instead of acting scared, he seemed excited, because to him undead monsters were like trunks of walking treasures full of ingredients. He couldn't wait to get them. That night, the dark elf of the guild was thinking to herself. She was surprised. Gale didn't seem like an ordinary craftsman. There was definitely something different about him. The next day, when Gale finally woke up, he said he slept very well. Moria corrected it. It was more like sleeping too much since it was noon. Gale mentioned that since they arrived, he felt the difference in the air. As Gimli said, this place was about agriculture and trade. Seeing people armed as adventurers was rare, so no wonder the locals found them interesting. Moria told him not to let it affect him. Later, they arrived at the entrance of the crypt where their search would begin. Gale tried to be happy, hoping the search would be quick. Moria was busy checking all her equipment, her silver knife, and to living incense and holy water. Gale called her worried, but she said she was just being prepared. He said everything would be fine, since he was an expert in fighting the undead. It just made Moria worry more. She warned him that if things got bad, they should run. He agreed. He understood that being in the guard position was difficult for her. Moria insisted that you both run away if it came to that. So Gale noticed a door nearby. It opened for a big cemetery. He was impressed by the view, but Moria remembered that they were not there to see. She thought the place was horrible. Gale guessed the undead did all the damage. He started throwing skeletons, and Moria questioned what he was doing. He pointed out that the skeletons had footprints left, like clues. Moria remembered that this cemetery was built upon an ancient dungeon. It must have been old, judging by the size. She asked if what they were doing counted as disrespecting the dead. Gale didn't think so. How else should they explore deeper into the area? Moria tried to show respect by pressing her hands together in prayer. Gale provoked her for being so serious. She said that compared to him, anyone would seem respectful. He pointed out that the skull she was praying about was actually a living creature. The only reason not to move now was because the sun was out. At night, he'd probably get up again. To prove it, he held the skull in her face. She looked closely. Then, suddenly, he broke it and turned around. He asked about her respect for the dead. She replied that the undead were not really the dead. They were just monsters. She hated all that. Gale thought he could have waited outside if he felt that way. He said the cemetery hasn't turned into a dungeon yet. The upper floors would only have weak monsters. That didn't make Moria feel better. Gale said he was going to the dungeon alone. He wanted better quality materials. He told her there was no need for her to waste her supplies, like holy water, gave her a flashlight, waved goodbye, and left, excited to find what he needed. Moria was there alone, angry. She thought to herself, why members of her guild, the Wolf Pack, always so selfish? He had just left her there. She looked around, realizing how dark it got. Then she heard a sound, and even afraid, she forced herself to continue. Eventually, she picked up Gale again at the cemetery. She said she wanted out. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed in the dark. Moria screamed, and Gale wavered from the sound. She felt something going through her and panicked, saying it wasn't just her imagination. Tears began to form in her eyes as she grabbed Gale, clinging to him out of fear. He blushed slightly from the sudden proximity. Then out of nowhere, a big explosion exploded nearby. Moria hugged him even more, shaking and screaming from the shock. While she was clinging to him, Gale tried to stay calm and sought the source of the explosion. He couldn't help but notice that her chest was pressing on him. Just for a moment it distracted him, but he shook quickly and concentrated. So he saw the cause of the sound. It was just a flying bat. Moria, pretending she knew all along, pushed him lightly. She admitted she only acted that way to get back at him for provoking her before. She tried to laugh, saying that undead were just piles of bones. But when she turned around, she heard the same scary sound again. This time, she came face to face with a real skeleton. Frozen with fear, she screamed and jumped into Gale's arms, completely panicked. Gale was holding her while screaming that the skeletons had arrived. He winked at the noise. She was screaming right into his ear and tried to calm her down. But she was panicking, tears falling on her face, saying she couldn't calm down. At least you begged her not to scream, right next to his ear. When Moria opened her eyes again, another skeleton appeared right in front of her, with her mouth open. That drove her to the edge. In an explosion of fear and despair, she shook her arms and broke the skeleton with amazing force. Screaming to stay away, Gale watched, stunned by her sudden strength. Moria stood up, still trembling, grabbed the flashlight, and shot straight into the undead. The fire caught fire, and the skeletons began to burn. As the flames spread, more skeletons approached. She screamed again, then pushed Gale towards them, making him stumble into the burning mess along with the skeletons. A little later, after the chaos resolved, Gale asked if she had calmed down. Moria, still a little shaken, apologized for the explosion. He asked why she appeared if she was so afraid of the undead. She didn't look and admit she was worried about him. These hunts were too dangerous to do alone. Gale reminded her again that he was a curse craftsman. His abilities were built specifically to deal with undead enemies. Still, he appreciated her concern and thanked her for coming. He reached out to help her recover. Since they were now inside the crypt, it would be too dangerous for her to come back alone. He asked if she could hold on a little longer. Moria said she'd try. He said if she got too scared, she could close her eyes. She said if she did, she could get lost. Gale said everything was fine. She could hold his hand, and they would move slowly. They both blushed a little while taking each other's hands. Gale realized that although he was joking about that part, they were holding hands. Just before Gale and Moria left the capital, a group appeared in the forge looking for the blacksmith. It was the Wolfpack party. They asked if he was running the forge there, because they wanted to sell some stuff, but the blacksmith wasn't interested. He told them directly that he didn't serve rude, noisy guys like them. Later, they were back in some cold, hungry alley with their blinking armor and their stomachs growling. Another rider spent it on the streets, trying to figure out how to make money. Look, one of the members announced that he took some missions from the guild. But they were nothing special. A job was the post, take ogres down the road. Another was the post C, defeating a horde of skeleton knights near the old church. There was also a patent search and beat up some elf soldiers, and a done post, hunt some orcs in nature. When he read it out loud, the others looked at him like he was joking. They were a party shrank, after all, one of the highest levels among adventurers. Why were they getting work so low? They wondered if Luke was trying to insult them. Norris, the calm one, told everyone to calm down. They were barely holding on. They had no strength or supplies to take on high-level missions. He reminded them of a saying, "Even a lion uses all his strength to catch a rabbit." They needed to get what they could. Kush complained about how cheap the missions were, but admitted that the ogre paid over 60 gold coins. Still, everyone remembered what happened the last time they fought an ogre. None of them wanted to go through that again, even if they claimed they weren't afraid. Melissa suggested they try to find the knight. The elf and orc missions paid very little to be worth the effort. Norris pointed out that the search mentioned a horde of skeletons. Maybe the orcs were a better option. Kush hit him, reminding him it was just a crank mission. Melissa argued that skeletons were easy for them. Then she turned to Luke and asked why he even brought these jobs to them. He said he didn't expect things to get so bad that they'd get hungry on the street. Norris tried to keep up. He said they'd have to do what they could. Luke agreed. Skeletons weren't exactly terrifying undead. The only concern was how long their magic would last. He asked if Melissa and Kush would be okay since they were the front lines of the team. Norris pointed them both out, saying they'd be the first ones to get hit if things went wrong. Luke agreed. They had to take care of themselves. Later that day they reached the ancient church grounds, just outside the capital. Luke scouted off the walls and reported what he saw. About 20 skeletons hidden in the shadows just beyond the gates. Kush laughed. 20. That was nothing. Melissa agreed and suggested that she and Kush take charge first. Kush raised his sword confidently, saying that's what the paladins were made for. He raised the gun. He pointed to the sky and sang a holy spell. A flash of light burst, and the skeletons began to move. Melissa ran ahead and erased some. She gave the signal. Norris began to cast magic, while Luke was jumping over the skeletons, hitting them from above. They managed to take down some in that first wave. Kush said this was his usual strategy. Your sacred skills lead the way. Melissa's rapid attacks during the prosecution, Norris burning enemy groups, and Luke dealing with final blows. It had worked before. Norris thought that would be controllable. Luke and Norris stayed behind for now, waiting to jump if necessary. Kush and Melissa went forward. The clergyman's protective barrier faded when they entered, and the skeletons began to rise. They both went ahead without hesitation. Kush was excited, confident that they would wipe out their enemies quickly. Luke, watching from behind, commented on how dumb skeletons were to be in sunlight. Kush laughed, saying the reward money was practically theirs. But before he could finish his thinking, one of the skeletons shook his gun and hit him hard in the face. Another hit Melissa. They both flew through the air and fell to the ground. Norris and Luke were there, shocked. As the two frontline fighters sat down, more undead enemies began to approach. The skeletons started beating them while they were still down. Luke called Norris in a panic, saying they'd die if they didn't act fast. Norris quickly began to sing a fire spell. He asked for hell, invoking a fireball. But instead of a massive flame, it was a small compact flame. Luke was confused. What good would a little fireball do? Norris explained it was condensed heat. It should still hit hard, even if it looks small. He sent the flame to the skeletons. It hit, but it barely did any damage. The undead didn't even slow down, and now they were turning their attention to Luke and Norris. The group fled quickly and locked the church gate behind them. His mission to defeat a horde of skeleton knights in the old church, a search for Patent C, had ended in failure. The next day they tried again, this time to go after the orcs. Melissa went into action when the orcs approached. She fell on one and stabbed her with the sword, but the blade got stuck. She was surprised she didn't fall right away. Before anyone could react, the orc grabbed her by the arm and threw her in the air. It was like I was trying to take her away. She was almost left in her underwear while fighting, asking for help. Orc looked at her for a moment and dropped her, turning around and leaving. Norris and Luke started laughing, saying she wasn't even the orc guy. She was furious and ashamed. Kush saw the orc's back and thought it was the perfect chance to attack. He cut with the sword, but the blade jumped. The orc, now feeling the blow from behind, turned angry. I was furious. Before Kush could react, he hit Melissa hard, telling them to fly. Hunting search for the Dork post also failed. A few days later, they were back in the guild of the adventurers of the capital. Everyone seemed completely defeated. They still blamed Gale for all his recent failures. Kush agreed, especially because he was forced to sell his favorite equipment to keep floating. Around them, other adventurers were whispering about how far the once great pack of wolves had fallen. Norris said when they had gold again, they'd go after Gale. Luke joked that maybe Gale was selling merchandise in a market. Kush agreed and asked what the search for the day was. The leprechaun, perhaps. Melissa said it at least seemed feasible. But when they got back from the mission, they looked even worse than before. Beaten, tired, and barely able to walk, they went back to the guild. Guild's receptionist asked if they failed again. They freaked her out. cursed Kush, saying everything had been unfair. Thinking of when they accepted the elves' search, the villagers were shocked and grateful that an elite Shrank party was dealing with it. They said they'd support them any way they could. Kush assured the residents they'd take care of everything. He said they wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Later, the villagers arrived riding horses. Things went wrong from the beginning. The gang of Shrank wolves was completely crushed and beaten by the leprechauns. In the guild again, Kush explained what happened. The villagers refused to pay them and called them lazy and useless. Guild's receptionist replied that maybe they should give up their Shrank license. Kush got angry and grabbed the collar, demanding an easier search. But she wasn't scared. She grabbed his hand and hit him hard in the face. Kush fell to the ground. The other 3 members of the party stayed there, not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, far away in the cemetery, Gale was underground, facing a new group of undead. The lower he went, the thicker the wandering souls got. There was a lot of valuable material in this crypt, and he was planning to collect everything. Moria was standing next to him, pulling her arm. She asked if there was anything nearby. He said there was nothing there, but she could hear the click of the bones and didn't believe him. She held firmly to him, eyes closed, as they walked forward. He told her to stop holding him like this. She insisted on feeling something around them. Then something came up. A bony arm rose from a grave, followed by a normal skeleton. So a much larger skeleton crawled up too. She asked if she could open her eyes, saying it would be less scary if she could see it. Gale thought it might make things worse for her. He said there was nothing there and started a countdown. As he said the final number, he waved his hand and cast a spell. Dispulse. The magic worked, and the skeleton dissolved into dust. When she opened her eyes, the undead were gone. She asked if he really used a spell to defeat him. He said yes, it was easy. She was shocked. Eliminating a curse to defeat an undead, she had never heard of it before. He explained that it was similar to what priests do. She argued that priests use sacred magic to purify evil, but Gale's magic was not the same. He admitted it wasn't exactly sacred magic, and it wasn't a good idea to use it most of the time. She asked why, and he tried to think of the best way to explain it. First, he wanted her to understand that what he was doing was not to ward off the dead. It was more like he was listening to their stories. Gale was holding a skull in her hand, while Moria was around, looking insecure about what he had just explained. She didn't understand what he meant when she said she heard the undead. To help you understand, he asked what she thought made the undead go up and walk around. She guessed it could be magic or malice. He said she was right. Soon after, a dead woman went up after her, and she screamed with fear. Gale quickly turned and defeated. He explained that this was something common in crypts like the one they were in, undead appearing out of nowhere. He pointed out that the undead don't like being cleansed or banned. He used a spell to demonstrate how they reacted. He asked her to imagine things from the undead's point of view. They were beings who returned to the world of the living because they had grudges or regrets. Then someone shows up, yells at them with some holy order, and tries to erase them without even hearing what they wanted or why they came back. Moria still didn't understand, so he asked her to think about when she was a child, if she was reprimanded by her parents without being allowed to explain herself. A souvenir came to her. Her father once yelled at her for wanting to be adventurous. He insisted that girls shouldn't dream about things like that. Even when she said that other girls were doing this, he hit his fist with rage and told her to stop. Gale brought her back to the present. He said the undead often have emotional leftovers, feelings they couldn't handle when they died. Some died hungry and are still chasing this hunger. Others died alone and now feel completely abandoned. Sometimes the grudges were stronger, like someone tortured to death by a crime he didn't commit. These feelings keep them from moving on. He explained that just listening to these feelings and showing a little understanding can help these spirits loosen up. So he took her to a coffin and opened it. An undead man got up. Moria was trembling with fear. A dark skeleton knight has emerged. He was a very dangerous guy, not something that people in supporting roles could handle. Actually, up close, it was even more dangerous than a lich. Without realizing it, Moria held on tight to Gale. His face was pressed on her chest, and he said he couldn't breathe. He raised her up a little higher to see the skeleton knight. Since she wasn't letting go, he just walked her in his arms. The undead drew their sword and looked at them. Moria started crying in fear. Gale calmly pointed his finger at the undead and cast a spell. The spell worked, the light shone, and the undead fell apart. He put her down, saying it was over. Looking at where the skeleton was, a ghostly figure appeared. He was wearing a knight's uniform. He leaned over to Gale and then disappeared. Gale smiled. Moria was shocked. She didn't understand what had happened. That skeleton had been a brank monster, and yet, after he disappeared, that young man's ghost had appeared. Gale explained that the man had probably died before he could say goodbye to someone important, his fiancée. That regret may have been what turned him into an undead. Moria asked how she could be sure. Gale said she learned to read the subtle signs, the little clues the undead left behind. He became good at it while crafting cursed equipment. Normally, if he listens to their story and responds kindly, they move on peacefully. Moria realized that all the undead wanted was sympathy, not advice, just understanding. Gale agreed. The undead were human, too. That's how he handled them. Not fighting, but helping them move on. As a bonus, since he did not purify them with sacred magic, he could collect materials of better quality. Holy magic removed all cursed energy, which was not good for your kind of work. Then a stronger undead appeared nearby, and Moria was overwhelmed. She realized that everything Gale said went against what she was taught about the undead. They went deeper into the crypt, and she looked at it carefully. She asked if he saw the undead as easy targets. He admitted it to him. For now, they were just materials. She got mad, grabbed his collar, and shook him furiously. She yelled at him, saying that he treated the undead as objects, as if they were easy fights, and demanded that he apologize to all the priests in the world. Gale was stunned by how suddenly she freaked out. He didn't understand why anyone would be upset with him. From his point of view, it was a win. He helped the undead move on, and he got their materials too. Moria couldn't believe how casually he treated everything. Her head jumped from thinking how strange Gale was. He asked her to stop screaming in his ear. So, gently, he asked if she wanted to hold his hand. She said yes. They kept going down the stairs and reached the lowest level of the crypt. This area was different. It was much brighter than the rest. Around them were strong, undead, skeleton knights, ghouls, archers, and dark spirits who seemed to be connected to the afterlife. She even saw wights. She counted at least 50 enemies. Moria realized that if enough pale souls of these undead were gathered in one place, they could illuminate a room like this. Gale asked if she was keeping her eyes open. She said she was fine. She was used to it now. Moria got tense. Gale realized she was lying. She wasn't very good at it. He started looking curious. She asked what he was doing, and he turned to say he was just wondering why there was no quilt in the crypt. Moria suggested that maybe that meant they'd have to come back another time. While she was talking, she didn't notice her bat slipping out of her hand. It fell with a loud noise that echoed through the crypt. All the undead nearby suddenly turned to sound. Fear took care of her. She thought they were doomed. But instead of attacking, the undead stayed there, trembling, confused, and nervous. She pushed Gale to hide behind a pillar. Then a new undead figure appeared behind a big door. This one was different. It carried a horn and irradiated energy. He wasn't an ordinary undead man. He was a wizard, one of the most dangerous guys. These were classified as disaster threats. One could create an entire army of undead and spread fear and destruction across the earth. Seeing one here was scary. But to her surprise, Gale was excited. This was exactly the kind of creature he expected to find. Moria was horrified. To fight like that, you'd need a high-ranking priest, and Gale. He didn't even go to church on his days off. Before she could say anything else, an explosion shook the crypt. The pillar they were hiding behind fell into rubble. Even in the dust, Gale said she didn't go to church. He stayed home, making cursed equipment and spells. Another explosion. Moria quickly hid behind him as the most magical tore the air. She looked at the wizard. His power was flowing into the other undead, almost like a wave. Now the other undead began to walk towards them. They ran. Moria screamed at Gale to stop running randomly. They needed to get out fast. Only one blow from the wizard would be the end of them. But Gale begged her to wait, saying she needed another moment. She asked what he meant. He took something out of the bag and stabbed her on the floor. Suddenly, a powerful wave of light spread. The undead trapped in the explosion burned with sacred energy. Gale sang a spell. Disperse the blessing, Moria gasped. It was a spell only the high priests could use. I wanted to save people from deadly curses. He created something so powerful on his own. The black mist covering the undead is gone. For a moment, they could be seen in their human forms again, then slowly disappeared, leaving a peaceful silence behind. Later, Gale stretched out and said the air seemed cooler. Moria sat down, oppressed. She covered her face with her hands and swore she would never go to a crypt again. Who beats an army of undead like it's nothing and calls it a trip? That doesn't happen. Gale thought you were overreacting. For him, undead wizards can be found in crypts like this all the time. He thought this was probably a nobleman in life who once ruled the place. Moria asked if he'd gone to many crypts. Gale smiled, grabbing her purse with enthusiasm. Crypts were exciting to him, especially when he found materials to make cursed equipment. He loved creating new items. Moria gave him a tired look. He was obsessed with cursed things. Gale proudly wrapped her new treasures. His necklace rang. It was made with the sword and the wizard's staff. He thought it was amazing. Moria said she didn't like art. He was shocked. She was clearly losing. He wanted more people to appreciate cursed equipment like him. He said he even had a tent before. She asked how it was. He lit up, remembering a girl who liked his drawings. A lot of people said they were creative. Cursed equipment, after all, could serve as decoration that also offered protection. There was definitely a market for it. Moria still wasn't impressed. Gale said she asked. He shrunk and said he didn't care. People would turn up eventually. Moria said this wasn't happening. He insisted on proving her wrong with the equipment and the store. That made Moria remember when she heard about Gale. She got an offer from a party in the guild. The woman behind the counter said the group was called Wolfpack. They were shrank, very skilled, but they didn't have the best attitudes. She saw a man being severely scolded by others. They called him lazy and said he was too soft. It was Gale. At the time, Moria agreed to join because the payment was good. Gale got kicked out of the party that day. When she met him, he was quiet, stressed and insecure. But now, without anyone holding him, his eyes shone with hope. She could see. He was excited for the future. She smiled. Maybe things were fine like this. Gale asked what she meant. She said it was fun spending time with him. He played with her about almost crying earlier. She got mad and said she didn't count as crying. He laughed and thanked me. Getting kicked out of the party led him to a small farm town. Alone, even with money, would have been a lonely life, but having someone to laugh a lot with men. And that was all thanks to her. Moria looked at him and blushed. She screamed, asking why he was suddenly being so sweet. He caught her off guard and panicked, running away from him. But then, in a calm voice, she said she was okay with it too, and thanked him. Gale asked what you said, but you didn't answer. In her mind, she couldn't believe how ignorant he was. At the beginning of the chapter, Moria brought the reward money. She asked what Gale was planning to do with it. Gale thought they'd split evenly, but Moria disagreed. She felt like she didn't deserve any of this. In her mind, all she did was slow him down. Gale didn't see it that way. For him, being at a party meant sharing roles. But Moria wasn't convinced. All she did was carry some of his stuff. And she pointed out how much Gale had. It was much more than a high-level doorman could handle. When she asked how he was managing, Gale raised her hand and revealed a skull bracelet he was wearing. Moria was disgusted, seemed scary. He explained that the bracelet was cursed. Gave him a lot of effects, extra storage space, increased strength, and even stress relief. Had done it himself, just so he could carry more equipment. Moria was shocked. A tool like this could completely change the way wars were fought, she thought. She covered her face with her hand in disbelief. Curious, she asked if he ever saw any normal magic items, the kind sold in stores. Gale insisted. As a cursor, he said it was important to stay up to date with trends. but he also admitted that he found most of it boring. Moria remembered that appearance was not the point. If he really had seen how magic tools worked, he should have known that most of them only have a single effect. This is how it should be. Otherwise, people cannot handle energy and tools become unstable. Even the best magical item purchased in the store can only improve 10% in one area. Anything beyond that, items with multiple powerful effects were extremely rare, even legendary. Items like this were known as artifacts. Gale just laughed. He compared them to national treasures and said they all looked lame. Moria felt frustrated. He clearly didn't understand or care about how serious this was. In his mind, the equipment Gale created was undeniably powerful, but his thinking was completely off the rails. He had no taste, no sense of balance or common understanding. She shook her fist, pissed off. Gale didn't see the big deal. To him, it was all innovation. If anyone could be creative enough, they could build items with whatever effect they wanted. Until it piles up several effects together. That's how the damn equipment worked. Moria thought differently. If it was that easy, people wouldn't spend that much money on magical equipment bought by the store. She went back to him again. For Gale, common magic items were basically toys. He offered to make one for her just for fun. She refused. In her head, she began to think more seriously about cursed equipment. The downside was that it always came with risks. Once someone wore cursed equipment, I couldn't get it out on my own. I needed a special ability to safely remove it. Not only that, but the curse has always demanded a price. Some items may increase your attack power, but make it weak under sunlight. Others may confuse your mind and make it impossible to distinguish allies from enemies. But then she imagined, what if there was a curse craftsman who could control all this? What if they could leave the curse on purpose and even remodel what was needed and what was returned? What if they could control the risk and the reward? Moria trembled at the thought. If that were possible, maybe Gale was a genius, a master craftsman capable of changing the world. Gale clearly believed that. He was proud of his projects and thought they were amazing. Moria gave him a sarcastic smile and said, "No one would ever appreciate them." Gale accused her of building it and knocked it down. In her mind, she agreed. As Gale continued to draw equipment like him, the world would never understand how talented he really was. So Gale pointed forward. The city was finally in sight. He saw a stroller nearby and called Moria for a ride. When he ran to the owner for help, Moria looked at him and thought Gale, the witchcraft. He was a little weird, but neat. She wouldn't mind being at his party again someday. Later, they arrived at the Guild of Adventurers. The receptionist, Gimli, greeted them joyfully, but she was surprised to see them back so quickly. She asked if they gave up the mission. Gale said it was the opposite, and he put several heavy bags on the counter for her to inspect. He told her to check that everything was real. Inside the bags were the remains of black skeletons, dark skeletons, and even signs of a mighty sorcerer. Gimli was impressed. She offered Tennyson bonus and increased to 30 cent. Moria intervened. She reminded Gimli that the work should involve only liches, but the dungeon had expanded and ended up containing a sorcerer, something much more dangerous. You could have killed them easily. She looked at Gimli seriously. First, the guild gave them wrong information. Now Gimli was offering a bonus like it paid off. Is that how an alliance should work? Gimli apologized. She explained that their guild was small, and sometimes their information was not accurate. She asked if 20% would be okay. Moria agreed reluctantly. Gale looked at her, confused about why she was so upset. Moria said that kind of thing mattered. The proper preparation was all in an adventure. What if they had prepared to shoot monsters and ended up facing ice monsters? That could be fatal. Gale responded by saying she was kind enough to care so much. Moria responded abruptly. She wasn't trying to be. Before she could go on, Gimli cut them off. Gimli apologized to Gale, explaining that she was not yet used to working in a guild. Gale didn't care, since most people don't usually go deep in dangerous crypts. Gimli admitted it was her fault to trust a gravedigger. She looked down, clearly feeling bad. In Gale's head, he couldn't help but think she was pretty when she felt guilty. He assured her it was no big deal. Exploring crypts was something he was very good at. Even though Gale wanted to protect her, He tried to contain the feeling. Jimli's eyes shone when he mentioned he'd be patrolling the area sometimes. She hugged him to thank him. Gale was surprised again. Gimli didn't look like that, but she was a guild master. That's when Moria suddenly separated them, telling Gimli to let Gale go. Gale turned to Gimli and asked if she was ready to start evaluating things. Gimli said yes. Moria made a strange comment, asking Gale if she liked girls who looked very young. Gale was confused and completely denied it, asking where it came from. Moria pointed out how kind she was to Gimli and even accused him of staring at her too much. Gale blushed and insisted it wasn't true. Moria cleaned it up, saying it was none of her business, but she turned her back with an angry look. Gale asked why she was acting like this. Moria said no, and then revealed something surprising. Gimli wasn't as young as he looked. Actually, Gimli was about 100 years old. Suddenly, something sharp hit the ground near them. Gimli said her hand slipped, but it seemed pretty clear that she had played on purpose. She acted innocent and changed the subject, saying that she would give them her search reward and share what she has valued so far. Gale and Moria were caught off guard, realizing Gimli had pointed at them before. Gimli put the reward on the counter. Gale said that he and Moria should share the reward, but Moria tried to refuse since she thought Gale deserved everything. He insisted, so she accepted and thanked him. Gimli said they could go back to the rest of the reward later. She waved goodbye, and when she was alone, she thought about what happened. She couldn't believe that Moria had casually revealed a girl's real age. So someone called her. Gimli was surprised to see the person and asked what he wanted. The voice said they had important information. Gimli has agreed to listen since the guild was closed at night. The person showed up and gave the news. There was an attempt to kill Princess Kara, but she survived. Apparently, she was using cursed equipment that stopped her from dying instantly. Gimli was surprised that it was not a sacred artifact like the shield of an angel. The person confirmed it was nothing of the Holy Church. It was an unknown cursed object. Gimli found this very interesting. She asked who the attackers were, and the person was not sure, but based on how they operated, it looked like a military group. Gimli thought it might be something planned by the Empire. She laughed gently, thinking it was a complicated situation. The person said he'd share more details later. Gimli thanked me and said it might be connected to his own mission. She asked if there were other interesting stories, but the person said it was all for now. Gimli threw a coin in thanks. The person responded respectfully and disappeared. Gimli talked to herself, thinking the Empire wasn't joking. Going after Princess Kara, one of the main heirs to the throne, meant there could be trouble within the royal family. Between the Empire, the capital, and that mysterious cursed item, something big was clearly happening. So your thoughts went to Gale. She had noticed something strange about him from the beginning. He had an alarming amount of cursed equipment hidden under his cloak, and yet it didn't seem to hurt him. That wasn't normal. In addition, he managed to defeat a mighty sorcerer with only one wizard of support. That meant someone on his team was treating curses like they were nothing and dead-living enemies like they were weak. Later, while taking a shower, Gimli kept thinking about Gale. He was probably a curse artist, someone who did and dealt with cursed objects. Gimli was a dark elf, and his species was also cursed. The only way to break his curse and regain his strength was to find the heart of the devil the Empire possessed. For now, Gimli worked undercover as guild boss. His goal was to gather information and seek a path through the tight defenses of the Empire. If there was a struggle between the Empire and capital soon, it could be your chance to escape. And now she had met someone like Gale, who could be the key to everything. She thought for herself, what if that cursed object used to protect Princess Kara was really something Gale created? She smiled just thinking. Later she opened a door and looked at some items, thinking again how fascinating Gale really was. Meanwhile, in the capital, a priest had just told Gale's old party something shocking. None of them were cursed anymore. They were confused. The priest said they were completely clean, with no trace of a curse. One of them, Kush, didn't believe it. He told the priest that they came there to remove the curses Gale supposedly had placed upon them as revenge, so that they could return to full power. But now, they weren't sure what to believe. The priest explained to the group that there were definitely signs that they had been cursed. But based on what he saw, they were completely free from any curse since the day Gale left his team. In fact, it was a miracle they survived the powerful curses that once affected them. Later, as they left the church, they began talking to each other. It seemed that what the priest was actually saying was that the strength they had now could be the true extent of their natural abilities, and that curses never held them. Kush didn't want to accept that. He squeezed his fist of frustration, refusing to believe. He thought the priest should be incompetent. Luke admitted he didn't want to believe it either, but he couldn't deny the thought by entering. What if he was a below-average wizard all the time? Kush tried to forget the idea and said he needed to concentrate on finding Gale. He assumed Gale must be broken and living on the streets now, so they should start looking for alleys instead of main roads. But Luke was finished. He apologized, said he couldn't go on, and started leaving. Kush screamed after him, confused by what he meant. Luke explained that they sold almost all the equipment just to pay for the priest's food and help. They were completely broken now. They didn't even have the money to stay in an inn, so they looked so tired. According to him, they belonged to alleys now. Kush didn't believe Luke would say that to his face and catch him. Luke endeavored to free himself, asking Kush to let go. Then suddenly Luke froze in place. Kush was worried, asking what was wrong. Luke didn't respond at first, but then he said that maybe it was a really good thing they hadn't found Gale yet. Kush was totally confused, not understanding what Luke meant. Luke told him to take a look at the warning board. Kush ran to him and took a newspaper from him. Melissa and Norris were nearby, observing curiously, wondering what caught Kush's attention suddenly. Luke laughed, saying Kush might not be so wrong. Kush came out laughing as he looked at the paper. He told the others their luck was finally changing. The paper was a real poster. He showed a picture of Gale and said he was wanted, killed, or alive by the royal government. There was a promise of reward for anyone who brought it, and even those who had useful information could make money. The warning told people to report to the nearest royal government if they saw Gale. It was signed by German Jerkenfer, the head of the royal office. Kush couldn't believe what he was reading. Gale became a wanted man. Everyone started laughing, feeling like they had a big chance. Kush pointed out that even if they shared what they knew, they could make some money. But if they really captured Gale and brought him in, they could be rewarded with riches, noble titles, maybe even expensive land or jewelry, anything they wanted. Now they were more excited than ever. They decided they needed to act quickly and seize the opportunity. Even if the royal office wasn't open yet, they wouldn't mind. They had more than just rumors. They were Gale's ex-partners. This meant that they could give more useful information than anyone else. And in return, they were sure they would receive a reward that was more than just a little gold.